Hello everyone. Nice to meet you again. Now we are enter today's chapter 3, Understanding the Role of Culture. This chapter's goals are, there are 6 goals to understand how culture affects of international management, to be able to distinguish the major dimensions which define cultural differences among societies or groups, to emphasize the need for international managers to have cultural intelligence in order to interact successfully in host countries, to recognize the critical value differences which frequently affect job behaviors, next is to be able to develop a working cultural profile typical of many people within a certain society as an aid to expected attitude toward work, negotiations, and so on. Lastly, to understand the interaction between culture and the use of internet. As the opening profile, here is the how to adjust business to Saudi Arabia culture. Okay, here Saudi Arabia comprises most of the Arabian Peninsula, all of the countries bordering Saudi Arabia are Arab countries, meaning that the first language is Arabic, and all are predominantly Islamic. The geography about the around the Saudi Arabia country. There are the intersection of culture and business. McDonald's stops serving 5 times a day when men are called to prayer. Circus has separate women-only floors, and Pizza Hut has dining rooms divided by gender. Although the roles of women are changing, they still cannot work directly alongside men or sell directly to men. As a West country, Saudis enjoy wearing high-end fashions, even though women must wear their clothes under abayas. Saudis also have become accustomed to foreigners holding most low-level jobs, so much so that it made the front page of the newspaper when a Saudi accepted a bellboy job. These examples illustrate how understanding the local culture and business environment can provide competitive advantage. Managers must alter their approaches according to the host country environment. Unfortunately, many managers underestimated the importance of culture. They lack cultural savvy. In Saudi Arabia, women outnumber men in universities. Women own 20% of all businesses. But account for only 7% of the workforce. And 60% of the workforce in Saudi Arabia is foreign people. Culture is the shared values, understandings, assumptions, and goals that are learned from earlier generations, imposed by present members of society and passed on to succeeding generations. It often results in shared attitude, codes of conduct, and expectations that subconsciously guide and control certain norms of behavior. As shown in this figure, national and social cultural variables provide the context for cultural variables, which in turn determine attitude toward work, time, materialism, individualism, and change. Attitudes affect behavior and thus individuals' motivation and expectations regarding work and workplace. Here are culture and its effects on organizations. Culture. What is culture? A set of shared values, understandings, assumptions, and goals that are learned from earlier generations, imposed by present members of a society and passed on to succeeding generations. Cultural sensitivity or cultural empathy is an awareness of and an honest caring about another individual's culture. Organizational culture functions equivalently to societal culture, but varies a great deal from one organization to another, even within a single societal culture. Nonetheless, organizational culture is at least partially a function of and must respond to societal culture. Airline KLM responded to Dutch attitudes regarding families and norms regarding relations by expanding its travel benefits policy to any couple who formerly registered as living together, regardless of whether the couple was heterosexual or homosexual, formally married or not. McDonald's provides more extensive training to employees in Russia than to those in the United States because Russians are less familiar with working within a capitalist system. The extent to which culture affects organizational process is a subject of debate. Some say that convergence is leading management style to become more similar to one another due to issues such as industrialization and worldwide coordination. This slide is a condensed version of the information in United States values and possible alternatives and suggests ways that differences between U.S. and other cultures might influence organizational functions. Here, U.S. culture, individual influences future, the environment is changeable, hard work leads to success, employment can be ended. It's the alternative, is life is preordained, and its management function affected is planning and scheduling like this. This one is the people adjust to the environment. It makes management function affected morale and productivity. Wisdom and love and also needed. It makes motivation and rewards functions. Employment is for the right time. It's made promotions and recruitment system. How about culture's effects on management? Convergence. Convergence is the phenomenon of the shifting of individual management styles to become similar to one another. Self-reference criterion is the subconscious reference point of one's own culture values. Many people in the world understand and relate to others only in terms of their own cultures. Parochialism occurs, for example, when a Frenchman expects those from or in another country to automatically fall into patterns of behavior common in France. Ethnocentrism describes the attitude of those who operate from the assumption that their ways of doing things are best, no matter where or under what conditions they are applied. Subcultures. In Canada, distinct subcultures include Anglophones and Francophones. Anglophones means English-speaking, and Francophones means French-speaking, and indigenous Canadians. Good managers treat people as individuals, and they consciously avoid any form of stereotyping. However, a cultural profile that tends to develop some tentative expectations, some cultural context as a backdrop to managing in a specific international setting. This is stereotyping. Here are cultural subsystems that influence people and their behavior. Kinship, education system, economic system, political system, health system, recreation, and religion. Kinship is a system adopted by a given society to guide family relationships. In the United States, this system consists primarily of the nuclear family. In some other countries, the system consists of the extended family. In the latter case, family loyalty may be given, primarily consideration in corporate activities. The formal and informal education received by workers influences the expectations placed on those workers and managers' choices about the recruitment, staffing, and training and leadership. The economic system influences sourcing, distribution, incentives, and repatriation of capital. The government imposes varying constraints on organizations and their freedom to do business. Religion commonly underlies normal, moral and economic norms. In some countries, religious beliefs and practices permeate everyday business transactions and on-the-job behaviors. For instance, McDonald's does not serve beef or pork in India out of respect for Hindus and Muslims. In Saudi Arabia, Islamic law prohibits the charging of interest. Various associations arise from the formal and informal groups that make up a society. About health system. A country's system of health affects employee productivity, expectations, the attitudes toward physical fitness, which in turn affect decisions about healthcare benefits, insurance, physical facilities, and sick days. Workers' attitudes about recreation can affect their work behavior and their perception of the role of work in their lives. Values determine how individuals probably will act in given circumstances. They are communicated via the 8 subsystems just described and are passed down through generations. Contingency management requires managers to adapt to the local environment and people and to adjust their management styles accordingly. Value dimensions and resulting cultural profiles provide only an approximation of national character. There may be variations in national culture. For example, subcultures may exist as well. Americans tend to think of the Chinese as culturally homogeneous, but distinct ethnic groups within China have their own customs and dialects. The global research, global means global leadership and organized behavior effectiveness. Global dimensions are based on data gathered by 170 researchers over 7 years. The data were collected from 18,000 managers in 62 countries. There are 9 dimensions that distinguish cultures from one another and have implications for managers. Assertiveness, future orientation, performance orientation, humane orientation, gender differentiation, uncertainty avoidance, power distance, institutional collectivism versus individualism, and in-group collectivism. Only 4 are discussed here because the other 5 overlap with Hofstede's dimensions. Assertiveness concerns how much people are expected to be tough, confrontational, and competitive versus modest and tender. Low assertiveness countries have empathy for the weak and emphasize loyalty and solidarity. Future orientation refers to the level of importance society attaches to future-oriented behaviors such as planning and investing in the future. Low assertive countries have sympathy for the weak and emphasize loyalty and solidarity. Performance orientation concerns the importance of performance improvement and excellence and refers to whether people are encouraged to strive for continued improvement. Low performance orientation countries place priority on things like tradition, loyalty, family, and background. They associate competition with defeat. Humane orientation measures the importance of performance, improvement, and excellence in society. Global research also indicates the existence of geographic clusters of countries that are culturally similar. This figure shows the 10 clusters that were found. The global research suggests companies may find it easier to expand into more similar clusters than into those that are dramatically different. Hofstede's research, which was conducted prior to the GLOBE project, is based on 116,000 people in 50 countries. Nonetheless, all of the research was conducted in a single firm, IBM. As such, the result should be interpreted with caution. Power distance is a society's the level of acceptance by a society of the unequal distribution of power in institutions. Uncertainty avoidance, the extent to which people in a society feel threatened by ambiguous situation. Individualism as the tendency of people to look after themselves and their immediate families only and to neglect the needs of society. And collectivism as the desire for tight social frameworks, emotional dependence on belonging to the organization, and a strong belief in group decision. Here are Hofstede's value dimensions, and this which countries are high or low about the dimensions of Hofstede. Here are power distance and how power distance dimension. The Malaysia, Arab, Mexico, India, like that, these countries are very high. It's orientation toward authority. But United Kingdom, Denmark, Israel, Australia is very low. Our uncertainty avoidance is for desire for stability is Great Britain, Japan, France is very high. I'm sorry, it's Greece and Japan and France, Korea is very high. But the United Kingdom, India and Denmark, Singapore is very low. Individualism as United States, United Kingdom, Canada is very high. But Singapore, Korea, and Italy is collectivism in these countries is very high. Masculinity, this means assertiveness, materialistic dimension. Japan, Mexico, Germany is very high. Denmark and Sweden is very low. It means relational, very relational dimension. About the long-term, short-term orientation, China, Hong Kong, Japan is very high in this dimension, and Africa and the United Kingdom, Canada is low. They are low. Okay, here Trump and us research gathered data from 15,000 managers from 28 countries representing 47 national cultures. Some of these are similar to other dimensions already discussed. Universalistic cultures apply rules and systems objectively without consideration of individual circumstances. Particularistic cultures tend to put more emphasis on relationship and apply rules more subjectively. Affective cultures tend to express emotions openly, whereas neutral cultures do not. People in specific cultures compartmentalize their work and private lives, and they are more open and direct. In diffuse cultures, work spills over into personal relationship and vice versa. In achievement-oriented cultures, individual achievement is the source of status and influence. In ascription-oriented cultures, status and influence come from class, age, gender, etc. To Americans, time is money, and schedules are strictly kept. In Latin America, the word for tomorrow is used to mean sometime in the future. Many non-Western societies believe in destiny of the will of their God, and thus tend to be passive and hostile toward change. For example, to a Chinese worker, the change to power machinery might suggest dissatisfaction with his father's way of life. Americans tend to value physical goods and status symbols. Many non-Westerners value the aesthetic and spiritual realm instead. In the US, individual achievement takes precedent. There is a focus on I. in countries like China, there is more emphasis on conformity and cooperation. Technology is changing culture in many societies, especially in terms of associations, education, and the economy. For instance, 70% of Korean households have high-speed internet. Only 23% of US households do. Korean teens who used to hang out at the mall now hang out at computer parlor. Culture also is changing how technology is used. The United States collects a great deal of information from consumers. In Sweden and many other European countries, the use and sharing of consumer data is closely monitored by the government. The Swedish airline example illustrated the extent to which privacy is protected and suggests some degree of uncertainty avoidance. About 75% of the world's internet market arrives outside the United States. Slow profiles have their limitations. Managers can use them to anticipate differences in the level of motivation, communication, ethics, loyalty, and individual and group productivity that may be encountered in a given culture. This comparative management in focus illustrates how to synthesize information from Hofstede and others to gain a sense of the character of a society. Much of Japanese culture and working relationships can be explained by the principle of wa. Wa is embedded in the value of indulgent love, which leads to mutual confidence, faith, and honor necessary for business relationships. As such, the workplace is characterized by a mix of authoritarianism and humanism, much like a family. Management systems stress rank and looking after employees. There is devotion to work, collective responsibility, and a high degree of employee productivity. The workplace of German company is characterized by performance for the rule and order and privacy and dislike. How to develop, here I read the competitive management in focus, South Korea. Here about the characteristics here, Korea, South Korea, and Latin America. Here is the respect for family, authority, formality, class, demonstrative, friendly, aggressive, hardworking, connections vital for business. Most contracts are oral. Honest criticism is rare. How about Latin America? Not homogeneous, but common similarities. Being oriented compared with doing oriented. Work and private lives are more closely integrated. Very important to maintain harmony and save face. how to develop cultural profiles here. Managers can gather considerable information on cultural variables from current research, personal observation, and discussion with people. And then managers can develop cultural profiles of various countries. Then managers can use these profiles to anticipate drastic differences that may be encountered in a given country. It is difficult to pull together descriptive cultural profiles in other countries unless one has lived there and been intricately involved with those people. It's about this slide highlights examples from Saudi Arabia profile. Tribalism is close friendships, honor and shame is characteristics of Saudi Arabia culture. Tribalism makes paternalism nepotism. Close friendships makes person orientation makes theory Y. It's respecting human being. Honor and shame makes conflict avoidance positive reinforcement. The international business managers make strategy in host countries, like in Saudi Arabia, this kind of characteristic. They can make most of this kind of characteristics. Okay, the dominance of small business means, that they are likely to become part of the value chain for most foreign firms. Guangxi in China refers to the network of relationships that the Chinese cultivate, and it entails the exchange of favors and gifts to provide an obligation to reciprocate favors. Leadership tends to be centralized, autocratic. The leaders feel a responsibility for their employees. As such, caring for people is put ahead of business concerns and efficiency. Because organizations tend to be centralized, most have only two primary hierarchical levels. The highest level includes the boss and a few family members. The second level includes all of the employees. Today, younger Chinese managers are integrating both Western and the Chinese management styles to some extent. Thank you for joining my class. See you again. Bye.